External Affairs. Yeah.
Good morning. Thank you very much that you're all here in such large numbers. This morning I'm absolutely delighted by the Chief Minister, Mr. Geopolitical, who is, I know, extremely preoccupied with matters of great urgency. The state rebuilds its confidence and indeed rebuilds its infrastructure and the life of the enormous number of people who have been so adversely affected by natural calamity, not just from your state but from across the country and indeed even from countries beyond the others. But allow me to say a word in condolence and in support, as indeed to record my immense admiration for the resilience, confidence, combined with compassion with which people of Uttrakhand, led brilliantly by their representatives in the assembly, as indeed the government led by Mr. Geopolitical, is a tragedy. We are with you, and everything the government of India can do is probably not the right phrase for the occasion, but to say that we won't leave any stone unturned is really to stand by you. And you will come through this ordeal and this trial, I believe, much stronger, much more united, and much more an object of admiration by people not just in India itself. We would have done this meeting with you much earlier had it not been for the tragedy. And I thought that we would give you a little time to set hold of finances, of other ways in which the rehabilitation work can be stabilized. And only then continue with this process. I want you to know that we picked first for this new exercise that we're doing on behalf of the Ministry of External Affairs was the state of Karnataka and the state of Uttrakhand. And I think I know because my colleagues at the Ministry felt not only of your strategic importance but also the fact that it's such a beautiful state and that you have a population not just of people who belong to the state but also to the business, on work, on duty, and that you combine the cutting edges of India's human endeavor, education, the finest educational institutions in strategic matters, to prepare young people in uniform. I'm so glad the senior officers are here. Then again, the best in civilian administration, identifying their watering hole here, their training, theories through their career. Everything that we consider today in the world to be important for good life is to be found here in the state, and therefore it was ideal for us to be here. And today to have been blessed by Honorable Chief Minister himself, the presence of Professor Vinod Jain, your Vice Chancellor, of physics that I discovered this morning. Again, a cutting edge of physics and science and technology. Of course, some very eminent professors, media persons, and of course, grad students of the university and eminent citizens of Dehradun. For here, for me, this is an important exercise for a very, very specific reason. When I grew up as a child, my idea of foreign affairs and India's foreign policy and place in the world was instinctively translated into those pictures that one saw on television, still black and white television, or heard on radios. Instead, certainly saw pictures in the print media of this world coming to India, being greeted by Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri, and then people would be lined up on the streets, and there would be big, huge public gathering, public reception given to the visiting dignitary. There was a much greater connectivity between ordinary people and foreign affairs. and of course India's place in the world. India emerged in its struggle as an independent nation, will continue to articulate the concerns about those who hadn't got independence, and that till the independence of all those countries in Africa and Asia would remain, India's own independence would remain incomplete. And then came, of course, the NAM movement, the Chief Minister mentioned, and the NAM movement became for us a major platform translating our ideology and our ideology of the freedom struggle into the way we thought the world should be organized. But of course, times have changed since then. Times have changed from times when we were at the heyday. Many of the countries, Yugoslavia for instance, a very, very significant part of the tripartite of leaderships that gave the cutting edge to the NAM movement, itself has split. The Soviet Union then, in India, global politics itself now has dispersed flower-like into many petals. And so you now have the Russian Federation, which you also have the CIS countries, Central Asian countries. Once the Cold War is gone, everything has changed. The very idea of ideological confrontation has changed. The world is moving towards reformed economic structures, economic institutions, and we have all now subscribed ourselves to new arrangement as far as economics is concerned. Not entirely yet to the satisfaction of the developing world, because there are still very heated debates going on in the conferences on climate change, on the WTO, to find a new trading arrangement that is equitable and fair to everyone in the world. We're still looking at how equity and opportunity can be combined in climate change. We're also looking at how institutions can be reworked, how restructured institutions would be truly reflective of today's reality, such as the United Nations, and not reflective of the reality of 1945. The world has changed and therefore needs change in our perceptions, and change in our attitudes, and change in the platforms of the world. I think a significant part of that change that has taken place, which is recognized now for the world, will happen not through catastrophe, not through a revolution, but through simple and sustained evolution, and that change has taken place here in India. And what is to the world today is a remarkable new identity and a remarkable new quality. And therefore, it is important, I think, to reflect upon our foreign policy, and also to reflect how much of our foreign policy is going to be seen by stakeholders in this country as relevant to their lives. And as we do in our generation, as we get engaged in the process of nation stage where our elders and the freedom fighters and the makers of the Constitution have brought us, we now need to take India to another level. And that second story, third story of this, of building India's democracy. But where is the participation? Where are the flag-waving children coming out? Where is the solidarity expressed by people coming out in public participation in policy? What we do see, though, is a very, very vigorous, not necessarily, I'm sorry to say, informed debate on television about foreign policy. What we do see is allegations, and what we do see is provocative pronouncements about foreign policy, but not adequately understood foreign policy, participation in that foreign policy by stakeholders, and the world foreign policy consensus in India remains as vital and as vigorous as it was in 1947 or in the 60s. Now, I do believe that the foreign policy consensus in our country has not broken down. This is still a strong consensus in our country of foreign policy. But articulation of that consensus in everyday exchange and discourses in our country seems to be somewhat under stress. And therefore, it was very important to only speak to the world about what India's national aspirations and India's willingness to engage with the world is, but to be able to carry conviction with our own people. And it was important, therefore, for us to speak to our own people. So, as I have urged our Prime Minister, that our Prime Minister will be dealing a lot more with our Chief Ministers, much greater exchanges between our Prime Minister and our Chief Ministers, not only on areas of economics where we do a lot of exchange, not only in the areas of social welfare, social justice, but a larger perspective of India's strategic interests and India's national interests as far as foreign policy is concerned. Sometimes people say that Indian foreign policy is nationalism, that Tamil Nadu feels that it must decide what India's foreign policy is vis-a-vis Sri Lanka, that Kerala must decide what India's foreign policy is vis-a-vis Maldives or Italy, that West Bengal policy is vis-a-vis Bangladesh, that Bihar, UP must decide, and Uttrakhand, what India's foreign policy is vis-a-vis Nepal, that Punjab should dictate what India's policy is on Pakistan, and somebody else should dictate our foreign policy on China. Now, that's not the way foreign policy is created, is developed, and presented to the world. The foreign policy is not state alone. The foreign policy has to be of the nation. Of course, the concerns of every state will have to be factored in. The relevance of the interests of every state will have to be factored in. But the face out, word outside, and the idea and the thought outside must be the idea of India, not the idea of the states of India. So it's very important that we get through to the states, we spend time with the states, we very strongly and believe is in their overall interest, and we communicate to the state what the combined convergent interests of all the states and all the people of India are, which become, speaking of the idea of India. And when we do this in the states, it's not only states as one whole, but indeed as stakeholders in the states as well. There are people from the media, there are people from intelligentsia, from the university, there are young budding professionals, there are aspiring youth, there is the armed forces. All of these put together will give you the idea of India. And I think that anyone who thinks that there is no India and that we have to rework an idea of India, I think is being unfair both to our history as indeed to our present and our future. So the important thing today for us is the challenges that we have today are essential of telling the world what we believe in philosophically, which goes back to the roots of our independence movement and what Mahatma Gandhi has given to us as our national vision. And what we have to convince the world again is what as a stirring, emerging economy. It's important that we do not let the world assume that we are a developing country only, because there are many parts of India that are no less than alike. Today, India is at the cutting edge of science and technology, certainly in software, in computers, in now being able to launch satellites, now aspiring to put man on the surface. Today we have the ability to manufacture very sophisticated equipment, even in the area of military equipment. We are today ability today to compete with the rest in the world. But while we say this, we are also acutely conscious that there are things for which we have to equip ourselves better. We need much more in terms of education and food, and through education and the food security bill. We need to be able to prepare ourselves much better for disaster management, although we have a remarkable disaster management force, and now we have our armed forces who did tread at the time of the tragedy here at Dehradun. We still need much better technological advancement to be able to predict and to be able to counter adverse impact, man-made disasters, what the Chief Minister just mentioned, that we have to now engage ourselves in a much greater way with study of ecology and sensitivity of the Himalayas. I am very proud that India now, as a member of the Arctic Council, is contributing to the study ice cap. We are studying the Arctic and the Antarctic. And the Arctic, our studies actually are at studying what happens, the impact of climate change on the melting of glaciers. And much of those studies will actually contribute to our better understanding of glaciers closer home, which is glaciers in the Himalayas, many of which you can probably say are part of your landscape. Why do we do this? Why do we go and study in the impact of climate change and get information to equip ourselves better to deal with climate change in our own region, but also because we want to be where the best in the world are. And India must be counted amongst the best in the world, whether it's best in the bottom of the world. And that's why we are there. But there's an important thing that India, and we have to understand, people speak of how important it is for India to be tough and to be determined. And I'm very glad that we have people here in uniform. And I want to share this with the civilians. Much of the problem that we have on our borders is a problem that can be handled very comfortably by our armed forces. The complaints that our armed forces have, and they say it very gently, is that we bring too much into the public domain by way of discussion, and therefore we do restrict their own flexibility and freedom to be able to function at their own level. It is true that we have historical issues with some of our neighbors, but it is also true that those historical issues cannot be resolved except by sustained dialogue. In order to have sustained dialogue, we must have faith, and we must have confidence. So it's important to begin with trust but continue to verify. Begin with trust but continue to moderate your discourse and your dialogue on ground reality. But also much of the ground reality can be allowed, which we would allow our armed forces to handle at their own level. They are very good to handle things at their own level. And we have confidence in them. It must not become for us a slanging match everywhere, so that they become self-conscious, are unable to do their duty as they are trained to do and they are willing to do. There is much that they can do, we must leave alone. There will be something that they will bring to our table, and when they bring something to our table, whatever our duty and obligation is, by way of assistance to them in articulating the position that India needs to articulate, we will do. War is not an option. And I think there will be few people who will say that war is an option. But to be prepared for war has been a very clear strategic policy position of our country in our national interest. And for us to have any doubt about our being prepared in the best possible way would be doing great big disservice. But having said that, it becomes important to carefully weigh whatever has happened, to decide strategically what we need to do, both in terms of what we do in diplomacy and what we do in other areas than diplomacy. But one important thing about diplomacy is, as indeed it is about military operations, that everything cannot be on the table in front of the media channels. It's something that has to be done in confidence. We believe in a free society, we believe in an open society, but there is a time and place for everything. You cannot break the barrier of confidentiality in certain areas till you have completed the operation that you are doing, and sometimes you will not, even after you have completed the operation, share details. But I do understand that in a modern open society where everybody has hunger for information, it is important for us on a continuing basis to share adequate amount of information so that people are not encouraged to start speculating, and by speculating add to the confusion that in the minds of whether they are being serviced, they are being served, and they are being looked after in the manner in which they do. And this is what we are trying to do by coming here through public diplomacy and through the social network sites, through publications, and much greater discussion that we hope we will be able to do. It is ultimately a matter of communication. Diplomacy is communication as much as it is a matter of strategy. And we hope by here and using you as a stepping stone for much greater understanding and communication, we will be helped and we will be successful. The important thing is in today's international relations is not just military power, but it is also economic power. A military cannot sustain itself unless it serves a country, a society, and it is strong. And India is economically strong. The world is going through some distress as far as economics is concerned. And inevitably, we will feel that distress as well. What has exacerbated some of the problems in India? We have been transferring ourselves or transmigrating from one kind of system of allocation of goods, services and opportunities in society to another kind of system. We had a closed system. We had a system where we now have a system where the private sector has a greater opportunity. And as we migrate from one to the other, we have to improve the capacity of decision making, we have to improve the capacity of accounting, and we have the capacity of communicating. Now, many institutions, like the courts, like the media, like the accounting systems, are also learning. We are on a learning curve. And we will, over a period of 5 years, have a far better understanding of the jobs that we have to do, including civilian government that has to provide opportunities in a very changed set of circumstances. Now, whatever distress economically is being felt in the world, is a distress that is exacerbated because of our learning curve experiences, which I hope will be complete in the near future. And that what has held us back from greater delivery and faster growth will not be something that will play over the years. But this has been something of a learning curve. But at the end of the day, we all must understand that India needs to grow at 8%. And India will grow at 8% if all of us, a judge, a bureaucrat, civil servant, a media man, a media person, the person, the professional, the person in the street, when everyone feels that they have a contribution to make, and that contribution is what will make it. And if India grows at 8%, then India will truly occupy a space right there at the front, at the highest table of the world. Now, very quickly to tell you, just put India in perspective. This is reality. India is placed geographically in an interesting position. It's not something to proclaim our dominance of the world, but if you look at Asia, and we all look at the important thrust of the world in this century, the Asian century is called. China and India are the great players, and of course, they are economically, they are the South Asian tigers as well. But China holds an important and significant position vis-à-vis the Pacific. India holds a very significant pivotal position in the Indian Ocean, and it's called the Indian Ocean. It's called the Indian Ocean. If you look at the picture of the Indian Ocean, IORAC, stretches from the bottom of Africa, the east coast of Africa, goes all the way to the GCC countries, and then comes up to India. And then beyond it goes into Asia, and from Southeast Asia down to the other extreme to Australia. Now you can't have a picture in which Australia is the pivot. You can't have a picture in which South Africa is the pivot. You can't have a picture the GCC countries are a pivot. The only pivot that you can see in this area is India. And this therefore becomes a unique conglomerate and combination of countries, economies and social systems that link water. Everywhere else in the world, the similar conglomerates are linked by landmass. We are the only ones that are linked by water. And the potential of this arc is absolutely enormous. But that's not enough. If you take this as one conglomerate, the Indian Ocean, and you then link it through Southeast Asia, through the ASEAN, through India's Look-East policy, where do we go? We get to the Pacific, the new Indo-Pacific. The new concept of Indo-Pacific, both in strategic terms,
in economic terms and in terms of geopolitical reality. India's engagement, growing engagement with ASEAN. We've now recently celebrated India's growing engagement with ASEAN, India's growing partnership with China, and I will come back to that for a moment. And India's Connect Central Asian policy provides a huge potential opportunity for the future. But there are some missing links in between. What are the missing links? India is heavily dependent, 80% of its imports of fuel, heavily dependent, and dependent, of course, on the GCC, dependent on Iraq, and dependent on possibly in future on Central Asia and Russia. Now, Central Asia and Russia, if we want to import fuel from their Tapi pipeline, which is Turkmenistan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, and the reality of our relationship with Pakistan and the stability of Afghanistan becomes extremely important. If we want a pipeline to come from Iran, then again we have the issue of Afghanistan. We have the issue of if we want a linkage import from Iran, we have to work out our strategic relationship between Iran and the United States of America. India is the only country in the world today that is able to say, we will vote against Iran because we support you on non-proliferation. And we believe non-proliferation treaty must not be undermined by those who have signed it. So we will support you on Iran as far as the sanctions, your sanctions, but the United Nations sanctions, but we will not undermine our relationship with Iran. We say proudly that we are good friends of Iran and we will stand by Iran, but that despite being good friends, we just be able to say to them, we are not going to vote for you when the non-proliferation issue arises and the issue of security, nuclear security arises for the region. Similarly, when we talk to Pakistan or we talk to China, we talk to because people might think that we feel we are weak and therefore we have to talk. We talk at equal level. We talk on power. We talk knowing our strength. We talk being conscious of the fact that we talk. But we have to say to the world that India is a responsible country. People are looking upon us as candidates for permanent membership of the Security Council. Now, people who brew streets in the neighborhood are not going to be seen as good candidates for membership of the Security Council. And it's important, and I say this with very, very thoughtful care. It is important. Here told United States of America, please do not hyphenate your relationship between India and Pakistan. Don't see India and Pakistan as a hyphen. We are what we are, and they are what they are. People have got presence on the Security Council as a permanent member, not Pakistan's presence on the Security Council as a permanent member, despite their claiming that they also have a nuclear weapon. But they are not being talked about at that level. Now, we this service, if we talk down at their level, and we show to the world that we rather continue an argument with Pakistan than to be able to sit at the table that will resolve problems of the whole world. But that is not just to be seen as a weakness. And therefore, whenever the situation has arisen, for us to speak in a firm manner to say, we are not going to accept certain things being done against us, and certainly not us who sacrifice their life to make our lives and the lives of our children safe. We will not stand anything that is detrimental to their welfare and their future. We say it firmly, and we do it, but we take steps in a manner that shows India as a responsible and sober country, not saber-rattling, not being irresponsible. When we speak to China, for instance, we speak with a clear understanding that we both know that historic problems are not going to be resolved overnight. We believe that there will be a mechanism to solve irritations and issues and problems and conflicts that arise at the border or at the line of action. And one important mechanism, as the Army knows, is a mechanism that is between the Indian Army and the PLA, that they are able to resolve. We need to get to know in the media perhaps one of 15 between at the border or the line of actual control that our armed forces resolve at their own level. One of 50. and one that comes out is seen as though there is a major failure. Of course there is. Also know that there are complicated forces operating in that country, as indeed there are complicated forces operating in our country, and that not everybody is always on board, not everybody has the same agenda, not everybody has the same destination. But an overall between us and them is that we will keep these matters of the past under control and under check. And we will continue to emphasize those dimensions of our relationship which are positive and that can create atmosphere and interdependence between India and China. And that is what we are working on. So years and years and years of assiduous and careful work is destroyed in a moment's interlocution. That is something that India in its maturity, India in its standing in the world, and India in its capacity and ability in the world must not allow to happen. Today we are on the cusp of greatness, not the greatness of tradition, not the greatness of our philosophy, not the greatness of our history, and not the greatness of our ideology. This is a word repeatedly endorsed and accepted. But greatness as players in world governance. That being on that cusp, on the verge of arrival at the highest seat in the world, we must walk every step with poise, and we must walk every step with determination. And while we are doing all this, there is an important dimension that we must not forget. People often say to me, China is all over. You go to Europe, China is all over. You go to Southeast Asia, China is all over. True. It is true. But I also want to say to you, I don't know what the best expression is, but if they say it all, I would say India is all under. Our roots are in the soil of every country I visited. All they ask for us to do is to continue to nurture the roots so that fresh, green. China is, if I may describe it like that, as an ATM on wheels. China arrives. It's new to the people of those countries. China is persuasive and compelling. China is also offering participation in growth, possibly in business, possibly in manufacture. But India offers something that goes beyond manufacture and growth. India offers, and this is what I found in Africa, this is what I found in Central Asia, this is what I found in Latin America, this is what I found in countries like Hungary. There is a partnership of the soul. All we need to do is keep that with India's growing economic clout. We continue to feed that partnership and ensure that the roots grow even deeper. This is the difference between us and China. And as our Prime Minister has said, the world is a large enough place and ambitions of India and China to be able to live side by side. It's good to have competition. Nobody ever does well who doesn't have competition. If you have competition, you do that much better. And those of you who are go and see a film called Bhagni will come out. When there's competition, you run faster, you run further, and you score higher. In this, I believe, we are willing, we are ready, but that flaw. There is one flaw, rightly or wrongly, what the film says in the Olympic Games, there was one flaw that Milka had. He was about to walk into the great countries that India has ever seen. When he looked back for a split second to see where his adversaries were. India must not look back. Just look at the tape ahead. It's not the destiny.